Today we're going to hear music from a Game Boy title called Uchuu no Kishi Tekkaman Blade. This is Pixelated Audio, episode 84.
Welcome back to the bi-weekly video game music and retro gaming podcast, Pixelated Audio. I'm James, and this is Brian.
How's it going, guys? Today we are going to be listening to music and talking about Uchuu no Kishi Tekkaman Blade on the Nintendo Game Boy. This is kind of a new soundtrack that I hadn't really heard before.
Right, we were just kind of flipping through some games, and we had a few on our list, and this one really stood out. The music is amazing. The game actually is pretty fun, so it's going to be a pretty good episode.
Yeah, you know, we were looking for something that would be a little bit easy. I'm in the process of moving right now, so we didn't want to disrupt the show, but we got some outside life stuff going on, so it's like, what can we do that would be a lot of fun? It has a nice, compact little soundtrack that we can demonstrate, and this stood out. It was a perfect candidate. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since we did the Game Boy, and not only are you moving, but we've had some crazy weather here. It's been super hot, so this is actually a late night edition of Pixelated Audio. It's 10 p.m. here right now, and we're trying to stay cool because when we record, we have to have the AC off and the windows closed and all that stuff, so we start boiling in here.
Yeah, we were going to record last Sunday like we normally do, and it was like, in the Bay Area, it was like 100 and...
It was 104 degrees.
Oh my God, that like never happens here, but when it does, a lot of these houses weren't designed with AC in them anyway, so it's like, we just suffer, and so we had to cancel, but we're back tonight, and we got just a rockin' soundtrack. I'm excited to go through it today.
Yeah, the track that brought us in was the title screen music from Tekkaman Blade, composed by Norihiko Togashi.
Yeah, it's a cool track. I mean, it's short, but it's a good way to kind of get everything, moving, and the track is just very energetic, and it has an anime feel to it. Just really gets you in this character theme kind of style game, I think. Really good.
I mean, a lot of times when we start out the show, we use a title screen track. I mean, those are the tracks that are designed to get the player excited, to introduce the game to the player. Right. And I think this one is a good one. It gets the energy going, gets your fingers twitching, ready to hit some buttons and take on some action. Yeah.
The thing I noticed about this right off the bat, though, was the bass is only in the left channel. So if you're listening with headphones on or listening in the car, that bass, that wavetable, the third channel of the Game Boy, is just very predominant in one ear, and then the melody and harmony, those two square waves, those kind of bounce between the left and right channels. So it's really interesting use of stereo in this track, but very cool. One other thing I wanted to bring up, and I brought this up in the last episode when we talked about TNC Surf, but it just has a TNC Surf feel to me. I don't know what it is. I think it's that dun 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 dun, and then it goes da 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 dun da 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 dun, and then I'm waiting for that like guitar solo to just come in.
Yeah. We'll get some of that later on. No, I know what you mean. This track is just, it's high energy, and it has a nice build to the end and kind of just wraps up nice, and it's a nice tight little package for a title screen track. Yeah.
Anyways, so Uchuu no Kishi Tekkaman Blade is a 2D action platformer based on the anime of the early 90s, released for the Game Boy on December 18th of 1992, only in Japan, developed by Sun L and published by Yutaka.
Now, Yutaka, the publisher, was actually founded as Shinsei Manufacturing, but later changed its name to Yutaka and joined the Bandai Group in January of 1990. Sadly, in 2003, they merged with a Japanese toy manufacturer that was owned by Bandai called Poppy and totally disappeared. Some of the systems that they've made games for are like the Famicom, Super Famicom, Game Boy, and even the PlayStation.
Yeah, but there's not like a lot of games that we would know here in the States.
Right.
Not by name anyway. There's like Last Armageddon for the Famicom, Deer Boys, which are big kind of franchise games in Japan. I don't know how the games actually are, but big franchises in Japan, but they just wouldn't translate. We didn't get those animes. We didn't get any of the comics and stuff
Right.
here, so didn't really make sense to localize it.
Yeah,
for
and it
us,
looks,
I think.
Yeah, and it looks like they did a few different styles of games. Like there were racing games and sports games and stuff like that. So they had a good variety of games under their belt. But like you said, a lot of them didn't come here.
Yeah. Sun L, I couldn't find a lot about the company. They were a small Japanese development house that mainly produced titles for the Game Boy and Super Famicom, basically contracted under Capcom, Bandai, and Banpresto. They did a few. There was The Great Battle 3, 4, and 5, which is a series of action games based on the Compati Heroes. If you don't know who the Compati Heroes are, it's basically a crossover between Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Gundam.
Yeah, those are awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like they do a lot of like kind of chibi style forms, like the super deformed kind of style.
Those super short, little cute with big eyes, stuff like that.
Yeah. So a lot of the games are kind of in that style. They also did Crayon Shin-chan 1 and 2, Mega Man Soccer, which I found was a little bit odd.
Yeah, that was like by far the biggest one that stood out on the list to me.
Which is still kind of relatively,
Right.
Ozumo Tamashi, which is a sumo wrestling game, and Kamen Rider, an action game based on the franchise.
Right.
Those are all for the Super Famicom. And then for the Game Boy, there was Battle Crusher, which is another Compati Heroes based fighting game, Tenchi Okurao, Rama 1/2, Battle Dodgeball, and Colt Jump. Again, not maybe the most well-known, but there's a few standout titles in there. But let's get into our first track of the day, other than that title screen, a full-length track.
Yeah.
This is from Stage 1, composed by Norihiko Togashi.
All right, you just heard Stage 1, composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
This is a really cool track because it sounds like Togashi-san actually stole some moves out of the Konami playbook there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Konami composer playbook. It's a really great track. I love the harmony and melody kind of building up in the beginning. It has like a lot of, I guess, just emotional build up in the track, and then it breaks down and you get these really kind of cool B sections, and then it kicks back in. It's just a really dynamic first level track.
Oh yeah, I mean it gives you a lot to think about when you're listening to it. Like it gives you this sense of like it's kind of futuristic, spacey, things moving quickly. Like it gives me this neon feel, even though the game is in monochrome because it's on Game Boy.
Right.
But I mean it's fast paced. It felt like it could have fit into like a racing game with a little bit of Mega Man and Castlevania mixed in there. Like it's an interesting track. I liked how it gave me a lot of different things to think about. Right. That a lot of imagery that was brought up, and I mean it gets you going. I think it's a good first track. It feels kind of bright and fun and intense.
Yeah, again, we're hearing the bass line all on the left hand side, and it's interesting because now he's using the second square wave on the Game Boy on the right side. So it's the harmony to that melody. It's all in one ear, but the melody itself is in both. So I think it's kind of clever use of the stereo separation. It's not really doing anything wild in the sense that, it's kind of going back and forth and making your head spin, but it's giving your ears different things to kind of listen to and pick out. And so I think for me listening, I'm able to kind of solo on one instrument a lot easier because he has them separated in a way that almost feel like hard pan. You know what I mean?
It's very clean separation. It almost feels like an angel on one shoulder and a demon on the other. Like you kind of have like the high parts and the bass parts, very separated. Like you said, not jumping back and forth. You get that with some tracks that they do make your like brain confused, but this is very clean and focused, and I think it helps with that kind of fast-paced futuristic feel.
Yeah.
Now, it's been a while since we've had a focus on a Game Boy game, I think. I mean, what was it, like Power Quest was the last Game Boy title we talked about?
Yeah, it was Power Quest episode 43 with Koichi Fujiwara. I had to look it up myself because I was like, man, has it really been that long? We've almost like doubled an episode since then.
Yeah, it's been like 40-some episodes.
Yeah, I think before that it was Kirby?
Yeah, we haven't done a whole lot of Game Boy only. I mean, we've played Game Boy tracks and expansion packs and stuff like that, but we haven't. It's been a while since we've really sold on just one for a full episode.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we're getting into it because it's been a while. It's overdue.
Yeah, I mean, so since it's been 40 episodes or so, I think it's safe to say that we need to touch on how the hardware works for this system.
Yeah, sure, fill us in.
So the Game Boy sound system consists of 4 channels. The first 2 channels are pulse wave oscillators or simple square waves, and the first of the 2 channels has the ability to do frequency sweeps. The third channel is a programmable wavetable channel that can also play back samples, which gives the composers a lot more freedom to work with, but also gives the system some great characteristics, which, I mean, we love the sound of the Game Boy. So.
Yeah, the Game Boy, the third channel. I mean, everybody loves that channel because you could do so much with it, and it really enhances the chip by itself, because otherwise you only have just the 4 channels.
Right. And the last of those 4 channels is a noise channel, typically used for percussion and sound effects.
Yep. Always used for percussion and sound effects, I think is the better way to word that. But Norihiko Togashi, I actually got a chance to talk with him. He's really nice guy, and he had at first I messaged him, and he didn't respond for like a week, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll just never hear from this guy. And then all of a sudden, like one day, we just started talking, and then sure enough, we started talking about food.
Well, I'm sure like like a lot of these composers, they're not people aren't knocking down their doors to talk to them about their music, especially old games that didn't make it out of Japan, and like so I'm sure their eyes aren't glued to their inbox, waiting for stuff like that.
Right. So anyways, he said that he started getting really into music as a student, starting at age 5. He was in a lot of different bands playing guitar, and he joined a bunch of after-school clubs where he could kind of continue the music education, for fun. When he was 18, he moved to Tokyo to study commercial design at a vocational school, and then ended up with a job as a sales rep for a while after graduating. During this time, he was still playing in a band, but after it broke up, he got a PC-98 and began creating music in his free time on the computer using Recomposer, which we've heard from almost every composer we've talked to at this point.
The PC-98 turned out more composers than, you can really think.
Yeah, I know. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I want to play with that software someday. One day. I'll track it down and just play around with it. Anyway, so he was doing stuff on Recomposer while also learning how to do sound effects and programming. And eventually he knew that he wanted to get into the game industry and do music. Just, I guess this passion kind of blossomed, and he really liked what he was doing. So around 1990, he landed a job at Sun L, which was contracted by Namco to compose the music for Final Blaster for the PC Engine, which is the last game in the Bosconian series. He's also worked a lot with Namco as a contractor for Sun L, or with Sun L, and Bandai Banpresto, and also Capcom. And altogether, he's participated in over 100 different titles, including ringtones, music production for toys, anime, and even did some music lecturing on the side.
Yeah, and some of the games that he's credited for working on are Battle Dodgeball, Ultraman, and Super Wagyan Land for the Super Famicom, as well as Ranma 1/2, Battle City, and some of the Kinnikuman games, as well as Bomberman's Quest on the Game Boy.
Yeah, the Kinnikuman is the Muscle Man. Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still have them. like the pink dudes.
Yeah,
with,
the
like,
little rubbery guys.
Huge lips and like the mohawks and stuff. Well, they didn't move. I don't know what you could do with them, but I loved them.
It seems like they were the Japanese equivalent to like the Green Army Men that we had here.
Yeah.
So like they didn't move.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they were kind of dumb, but they had their different, pre-planned poses.
There's like a dude with like just a blockhead. Maybe his name is Blockhead or something.
Maybe.
Anyways, while most of his work never made it outside of Japan, he's widely famous there for the Compati Hero series. Like a lot of those games he did the composition for, and also a lot of other licensed character games. So the guy's loved for those. I mean, he was able to produce something that was not only sometimes matching what the theme was of the anime or something, but he also created a lot of unique things. And that's kind of what we're hearing today, because we listened to the theme song of Tekkaman Blade, and it sounds nothing like the theme song of this game. So there was a lot of creative inspiration, I think,
right,
or a lot of creative work done to create the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's always so interesting learning about these different composers. I mean, this guy almost ended up as a sales rep, and I mean, he just was happened to be born at the perfect time. In the 80s, he was of an old enough age to where he decided that games were exploding. Nintendo was huge. Everything, other systems were popping up all over the place, and all this competition and new games and all these new companies starting up, and then all this new software that was becoming, easily available for everybody. And you just pick one up at home, start playing with it, and before you know it, I mean, this guy's, like you said, has worked on 100 different things and done some pretty cool stuff.
Some of those Nokia ringtones. No,
yeah.
So what do we got next?
So next up, we're going to be moving on to stage 2.
And that was from Stage 2, composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
Now, this is another cool track, but I mean, it's not really a track that you're going to listen to out of context, like in your car all the time.
It's not as exciting as, say, those first two tracks we heard, right?
Right.
But yeah.
But like in context in the game, it adds a lot, because then this second level feels much more dangerous. Like you're really starting to get into the adventure.
It feels more Imperial almost.
Yeah, like you're kind of in someone's base or someone like enemy territory type thing. Much heavier. It's very much in that heavy bassy range. It doesn't get really like high. It doesn't really do a whole lot even. It's kind of a simple track, but it's got that dark tone that really sets the mood.
Right. Norihiko Togashi, while he was still composing game audio, he joined this GarageBand users group. And, GarageBand, the Mac application where you can kind of make your own stuff. It's kind of like a user-friendly way to, create loops and tracks. And a lot of really professional musicians use it.
That's cool.
Anyway, so he joined this users group. And there he met a woman by the name of Junko Okano. And together they formed a pop band called NJ, like Norihiko and Junko.
That's cool.
Yeah. And they've done like 4 different albums, a ton of singles. I think maybe it's the most 2 or 3 recent are both on Apple Music and Line Music right now. And I was listening to it and I was like, wow, this is like kind of cool. I mean, I'm not into J-pop, but like the guitar riffs and stuff are really cool. And like, so, the guy's still keeping up with music and he's still doing it professionally. So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Got some NJ pop.
Yeah, NJ. All right, so let's get into the next track. This is actually the stage clear music, which is weird because it's actually longer than the title screen, but it's pretty awesome. So let's take a listen.
You just heard the stage clear music composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
I love this track.
This is a really, really good one.
Funky, nice beat. The melody kind of harmony part on there, it's weird. It's a little out of place, but in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that bass too is interesting. It's got like this weird kind of harmonial pitch, like high pitch to it. Do you want to hear that real quick?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, let's check that out. Hold on, let me find that here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was so cool.
It has like a little of like a zappy sound to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a great track. It's kind of smooth and it's got a nice groove to it, but it has like this tinge of sadness. But even though it's a level clear, like you just beat the level, you think you'd be pretty happy. So it kind of gave me this thought that like you're kind of sad about having to do all this battling, or like the Earth has been destroyed and like you're killing things, and it's kind of like you've pushed me to do this type thing. So I thought that was kind of neat. I mean, I don't know if that's what they intended, but that's the idea that it gave me, that you're maybe not super happy about having to do all this stuff.
For me, it felt almost like, you're watching an anime and this is like kind of the commercial break, between, parts of the episode or whatever. It's kind of like a little, not comical, but more of like a relaxing break.
Yeah, and in the game, it gives you a surprising amount of time after beating a boss, which, that had to be something intentional to not just go, okay, fade out, stage 2, fade out, stage 3.
Right.
I mean, you can like run around and jump and do different stuff. It almost felt like that wasn't the end of the level.
Exactly. Yeah, so this game is based on an anime, which we mentioned earlier.
Right.
It was written by Mayuri Sakijima and Satoru Akahori and directed by Hiroshi Negishi. It was produced by Tatsunoko Productions and Sotsu Agency from February 1992 until February of 1993, with 50 episodes airing in that first year span. And it was followed by a sequel series called Tekkaman Blade 2, also an OVA, and a video game for the Super Famicom, Game Boy, and PC 98. Now, this actually did make its way to North America and Australia, known as Technomon, and was dubbed into English but heavily edited and released only 42 episodes instead of the 50. So they must have cut out some of the fillers. A lot of those Japanese animes, they'll have like filler episodes. I know Naruto is really known for that, and Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that.
Dragon Ball Z will be like a series of 10 episodes that are just fillers.
Yeah.
But they definitely cut it down, and I mean, maybe when they dubbed it to English, some of the stuff didn't translate well, or they just said, we don't want to do that. That's, I don't know, but I never heard of it. It wasn't an anime that I saw. I mean,
neither did I.
Anime was pretty popular when we were in high school, so it's could have popped up, but I've never heard of it.
I think it might have just been before, because 1982, right? Like just before that bubble of anime, so because I think it was like mid late 90s where it like really started taking off here, and so maybe it just missed that, or maybe it just wasn't really that good. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so about this game a little bit, the actual story or the plot of the anime.
Yeah, so it seems like the games and the anime kind of follow a very similar storyline. We did some cross-sectioning of the actual, synopsis of the anime and compared it to the Super Famicom's opening and the Game Boy's, title opening, because they do have cutscenes at the beginning of both of the games.
Right.
So what we've been able to gather from the series is that it takes place in the United Century 192. Humans are on the brink of extinction. The orbital ring system, which is a giant space station built by humans for deep space exploration, has been taken over by a mysterious life form known as Rodham. Mankind's connection to space has been completely cut off, trapping them on Earth and leaving them to the mercy of the Rodham attacks from that orbital ring system. So they're kind of set up in a very good position to keep humans, in check.
That's funny. Orbital ring. I think that's actually the name, or they give it a title for the first level, like say the orbital ring. So,
okay.
So that must be where it comes from. I was like, okay, what does this have to do with anything? Of course, I didn't know anything about the anime, so I couldn't really put the connection together. But okay, that makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, and from that space station, they have scorched the Earth. Cities have been destroyed, and humanity is falling into ruin. It's been, they've had a terrible time with these Rodham aliens that have shown up, but soon they have a hero on their hands with this young man with amnesia, like most animes and video games.
Else. Yeah.
So he's found and is brought to the Space Knights and dubbed D-Boy, and is basically the Earth's last hope.
D-Boy?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess they saw him in action when he first landed and called him Dangerous Boy and then shortened it to D-Boy.
D-Boy. Yeah. Better than like D-Bag or something.
Yeah. It does make you think about that, but then it also makes you think about different rappers and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's some D-Boys out there. But he has this crystal that allows him to turn into the Tekkaman Blade, and this allows him to be the only human capable of fighting the Rotom aliens. So he's essentially humanity's last hope, which is a pretty cool story. But when digging through the anime synopsis, there was a little bit more detail as to who D-Boy is and where he came from, which I thought was pretty neat to kind of share.
It actually makes it a little bit more interesting because that first part there, like it just sounds like everything else.
Yeah, it's kind of cookie cutter. But so like we mentioned, D-Boy, also known as Dangerous Boy, he has a real name. His name is Takaya, and he is a young man that was on a spaceship called the Argus with a crew and his father, and they were exploring. While near Saturn, they found a dormant ship and boarded it to inspect it. Everyone on the Argus was captured and put into pods, turning them into Tekkaman. And everyone except Takaya's father, actually. He was rejected by the pods, so he rescued his son, putting him on an escape pod alone before hitting the Argus's self-destruct. So sacrificed himself to save his son. He
shot him off into space.
Yeah, to, get him away from the ship.
Right.
He actually traveled in space for 6 months before reaching Earth. And in that time span, the once dormant ship of the Rotom crashed into the moon and began their assault on the Earth. So it's kind of neat that they interacted with the ship ended up crashing and taking this assault on Earth, while Takaya just floated in space for 6 months and then eventually showed up with this awesome power from being on the ship.
So do you know how they realized he had this power, or did he know?
From what I read, I haven't watched the anime or anything like that, it seems like he shows up, starts kicking ass, and then they start calling him Dangerous Boy, and then he's brought to the Space Knights because the Space Knights were the ones that were fighting the aliens, and now this guy is way stronger than they are. So
awesome.
Yeah, that
D-Boy.
It is like that first part was pretty cookie cutter, and then that was kind of neat to learn a little bit more about the character that you play as in the game.
Right. I hadn't known. Now I have a lot more respect for what's going on, because for me it was when I was playing it the other day, I was like, I don't know who these characters are. I have no relationship,
just some
no
cool
backstory,
mech.
And so I was just playing. I was like, this is an awesome game, but whatever. That's really cool to know. Let's get into our next track. This is from Stage 3, composed by Norihiko Togashi.
You just heard Stage 3, composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
Pretty cool. The 3 channels in tandem. You get the first 2 square, and then you got that wavetable. Kind of builds up. I really like when they do that. It's like dun dun dun. It's really forceful, very tenuto, and then it kind of breaks apart and starts doing its own thing. It's a cool track. It's just it's still maybe not the energy I hope, but at the same time, like I do really appreciate it. I think it sounds really cool.
Yeah, this is another track that I think is not the greatest to listen to out of context, but adds a lot to the level. You do have that bass in the left ear again that's very heavy. It's very simple, and it's working in tandem in the very low parts, but then that melody starts to kind of, break away a little bit and kind of add a little bit to the track, which was nice. I mean, it's a great track. It's solid. It's I could see that it's the most high energy, but
look, I like the track.
Yeah.
It's just not the same amount of energy from the other ones that I really, really liked. But it's still fun to listen to.
Yeah, and you can tell they put a little bit of stank on the end of this track where, I mean, it really picks up. And that's the kind of energy I think that we noticed that we were missing because we got it at the end.
Right. That's straight up Ninja Turtles right there.
Yeah.
That dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun. Yeah. All right, so again, this is a 2D action platformer, has 6 different levels in it. You run around as this giant kind of mech, and it's really cool, great animations. The character swings this kind of blade around, but you're in this suit, this mech, and it has a bunch of different power-ups that are already equipped. It just requires kind of time to build up or energy to build up to be able to use them.
Yeah, and this game actually reminds me of like a kind of like a Metroid type game. Like if this game just came out today by an indie developer, I would have sworn that they were super inspired by Metroid.
Right.
And not to say that this is a Metroid clone. I mean,
it's very different.
Yeah.
It's just a 2D action platformer. It's not really has that kind of hide and seek kind of mentality where you're trying to find power-ups and stuff. Different, but I can see your point. It does have a very similar kind of workflow, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, this game is pretty unique and does a lot of really dynamic things for such an old handheld. But I mean, you're as a mech running around in these kind of maze-like levels, and you move very quickly and have all these different power-ups to your disposal, which is it's a really neat game.
A lot of cool little acrobats too, the way you can kind of move around. The attacks are awesome. So you have this basic kind of swipe attack. It's a little bit awkward because it's so close. It doesn't really extend very far.
Right.
But if you hold the button, you can actually throw it forward like this, like a javelin kind of thing. And then, but the thing is, you can't jump and throw it, so it makes it a little bit awkward.
Right.
So if you're holding it and you jump in the air and you let go, the character has to land before it'll actually throw, and it'll just do that. The drawback to throwing it is you have to go retrieve it again, and you can't really attack until you do that, or you just have to wait for like several seconds, like it's like 10 seconds or something, and then like it just turns back into you. But while you're in that kind of no man's period, you just have like a second grappling hook,
right?
Which moves me on to the grappling hook, which is by far the coolest part of this game.
Oh yeah.
So you have this really sweet long reaching grappling hook that you can throw to stick to ceilings and platforms. It only goes straight up, so you can't angle it or anything.
No diagonals, no straight across. It's just straight up.
Right, but you can adjust the length of a rope by moving up and down, and you can jump basically, into like tight areas and stuff. It makes it really nice. It reminds me of Bionic Commando, but without the diagonal or swinging kind of motions to it.
Right.
But it is really neat, and it actually, without that, I would say this game is very mediocre.
Right.
But it just really adds a lot to it. It makes it so fun to kind of say, like, hey, where can I go?
Right.
And I had a lot of fun playing that.
Yeah, I mean, and being able to adjust the length of the rope and jump off whenever you want. And you can actually, shorten the rope very quickly and then jump off to kind of give yourself this extra boost that allows you to get, a really big jump. It's
right.
a really cool aspect to the game. It's done really well. It looks nice and it plays nice. So, and like you said, without this aspect to the game, it would be very mediocre.
Right.
Yeah, and like you said, without this, it would have been a relatively mediocre game.
Right.
But like we mentioned, there were specials, and they are really cool. I mean, they're preloaded into the character. They're already there when you start. You don't have to go hunt them down.
Collect anything, nothing like that.
Which was kind of surprising. And they're all listed out there at the bottom. And further to the right, they cost more energy. Like we said, there's no energy replenishers in this game. There's nothing.
It's just time.
Yeah, there's nothing to pick up. You just have to wait for it to rebuild. So starting on the left with the least energy intensive specials, there is one that lets you scan the area. It takes off all the enemies and allows you to move the screen around the level to actually kind of take a look at what's coming up ahead, how the map is laid out, if there's any platforms or spike pits and stuff like that, which was really surprising. I did not expect this at all in the game.
Yeah, and that's nice because there's a lot of areas where you have to jump like And one thing we should mention is the high jump.
Oh yeah.
So if you hit up in A, you do a grappling hook. If you hit down in A, you do this, or down in B, I think it is, you do a high jump, and your character just kind of like catapults
really high,
in the air. And you can't move to the left and right. You can't attack anything, but you can use the grappling hook at any point during that high jump. So this scan, it's really nice because you can't see a platform maybe like 5 screens up, or you know what I mean? And then when you scan it, you can be like, oh, I see what I have to do here. In case you get stuck. I think it's a really useful kind of special.
Yeah, it was something that I didn't expect at all, and was kind of neat, and especially for learning the game and playing it for the first time.
Maybe good for speed running.
Yeah, it lets you kind of look around and see, and like you said, there's a platform way up there and you can get to it. Things that let you move faster in water or on land, things that make you invincible for a short period of time against spikes and toxic water. There's one that lets you kind of fly or float around, and I say float because you have limited horizontal movement, and if you take any damage, this mode turns off immediately and you start falling, kind of like a bubble popping.
Right. I liked that though, because there were some areas where I was like, I can never get up here. There's too many enemies or something, and I just kind of zipped right past it.
It's kind of like a slow little like jetpack type thing.
Yeah.
There's also one that lets you freeze all enemies, including the bosses, but this is the second to most expensive, energy intensive special, so you could probably only use it once and have to wait for it to replenish. And then the most energy intensive special is one that destroys all enemies on the screen, but it sadly doesn't work against bosses. So
otherwise that would be just a cheat. You just hang on to that.
Right. You just hang on to it, get to the boss. But so once you use all those, you just wait for the rebuild, and once basically the little 2 letters light up, you can use it again.
Yep.
But it's really neat. And there's also a little bit of a leveling up system to this game. You collect these little power-ups that make your basic attack a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
And if you die, you lose it, so you have to kind of rebuild it again.
Yeah, so when I got those, I couldn't really tell what was going on, but I noticed that like certain enemies that took me like 3 or 4 attacks to take out, the higher level, it took a few less attacks.
Right.
That was the only thing I noticed during my playthrough.
Yeah, we didn't even really notice it at first. And then I was like, hey, Brian, it says like level 2, and now it says level 3. And then we're like, oh, okay, these things here that we're collecting, they look like little kind of like spearheads or something like that. Like you collect them, and then you see this little level 2 pop up. And
I don't really know how much they affect it, but I mean, they're there for a reason, right? So
right. Well, and if it ends up making it so that instead of doing 2 damage, it does, or instead of doing just 1 damage, it does 2 or 3. I mean, that could be really helpful when it's multiplied off over like a boss or something like that.
Right. So, about the gameplay, it's kind of funny because we listened to the soundtrack and we're like, wow, this is pretty cool. The soundtrack's awesome. We hadn't tried out the game yet.
Right.
And
we were blown away by the soundtrack, and we're like, I hope this game is fun.
Yeah, I was at home, and I was like, hey, James, how about I stream it and we'll check it out? And tell me what you think, and we'll see if this is, episode worthy kind of thing. We're looking for something kind of simple. And, popped it in and played. At first I was confused. I was like, what's going on here? But after like 10 minutes, everything felt natural. Like the movement is really clean. It feels... It doesn't, you don't feel a bunch of slowdowns.
Right.
Everything feels really nice and what you would want in a 2D platformer. And I think that, regardless of Game Boy, this is just a awesome game to play. It's so fun. Now, the difficulty ramps up like tremendously.
Oh yeah.
And that's what kind of killed it for me. And I like hard games, don't get me wrong, but this is like really, like, I don't even, like, I'm trying to think of a word to describe like how frustrated I was. That's PG-13, and I can't come up with it.
Yeah, because I mean, when you first played it, because I was at work and you streamed it, I popped it on and kind of was watching in the background. You got to the first couple bosses and was like, okay, this is not so bad. Right. But it does seem like Game Boy games tend to get very difficult, or like, puzzle games tend to have a lot more levels than like the console counterpart. I mean,
why is that?
I think it's just because it's a handheld, kind of meant to be played in short bursts. You take it on the go, and so it's like, okay, instead of being able to beat this game in 10, 15 minutes, let's make it an hour, but break it up over different. I don't know. It's neat. I liked it, but this is definitely not a game you're going to be able to beat probably their first time.
Yeah, but I would recommend, if you haven't played it, which most likely you haven't,
right,
try it out. It's really cool. It's definitely one that I wish would have made it here, and we would have been able to enjoy it back in the 90s. Anyways, let's get into our next set of tracks. Let's start with stage 4, and we'll be right back.
All right, that was stage 4, composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
Pretty fast, intense track. I like it. It's got like an Iwatsuki vibe to it, like meets Megatoru. Like it almost feels like it could fit in that game.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I liked it. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was kind of a shorter track. It was under a minute, but we got to see some of that energy, that fast, intense, sound kind of peek back in, which was nice, nice to see again. This was cool, great sounds, awesome, cool little like bends and stuff like that. Right. It was really neat.
This is as far as I made it in the game, to be honest. I got to the stage 4 boss and I was like, holy crap. Like all the other bosses, you can really power through and
just kind of
learn their, their tells and stuff like that. But this boss is where it ramps up. And so what it's like this, it's almost like this statue with like these 4 snake heads that pop out, and it shoots these homing missile orbs that come at you, and you have to, there's no point that you can actually see on the boss that you have to hit, and believe me, I've tried everywhere. It just seems way too hard, and my explanation doesn't bring out the frustration as bad as it was when I was playing, but I was like, there is no feasible way for anyone to beat this game or to beat this level, without using save states. And
but there is. There have people. There is a speedrunner.
Don't tell me that, James. Don't tell me that. All right, let's get into our next track. James, what do we got?
Next up is stage 5.
And that was from stage 5, composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
This is another, neat track. There's nothing like super special about it, but it has this kind of like weirdness to it. Like there's something really odd about the track. And I mean, it is kind of like a simple loop that's kind of like an alarm. It kind of makes you feel like something's about to blow up, maybe. A
little repetitive,
But there's like this weirdness to like the progression of the track, which is kind of neat. I like that, actually.
Yeah, me too. I don't know. I was like, wow, this is cool. It just did kind of like get old after, listening to it. We just listened to like 4 loops and we're just like, okay, I think we're good. But, it's cool. It's simple. This track, if I would have seen it in context, it might change my opinion about it a little bit. But, altogether, even though it's short, I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the game, you mentioned Metroid, and that it kind of reminds you of that. It does kind of look like Return of Samus.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that Samus's sprite is probably like maybe twice as tall. Maybe it seems a little. This character seems the Tekkaman Blade seems a little small, but that's not bad. I mean, it gives you this big open field for like the maze-like levels. It has that dark kind of like desolate
Spacey,
space,
kind of, yeah.
And a lot of the bosses have like this kind of like organic, like bug type feel, which is very Metroid-like to me.
Right.
But yeah, it's really beautiful game. I mean, it has some great textures. It has some interesting patterns. I definitely love. When I first saw the level where it's kind of like, it seems like outside in space, like with the stars. I mean, the sky's so big and you're jumping around all these platforms, moving up, and you just kind of feel like you're on this big space station.
Right. Now, I think the maps are a little bit, the actual sprites themselves or the background images are a little repetitious.
A little bit.
But I don't think that's bad because in this, really you're focusing on the action. And I think if there was too much diversity, it might kind of throw you off to what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go. So it kind of took a back seat for me, and I was just enjoying the platforming element a lot more. But the game itself, you're right, those bosses are very, very pretty looking. Tekkaman Blade moves around not super quick, but when you're jumping and flying through the air, you're moving really fast. I don't know what's up with that jump. It's kind of like that's kind of like the Metroid jump where she turns into like the spin ball and kind of zooms around. It's kind of like that. But again, with the grappling hook and everything like that, it makes it so much more enjoyable. And I think the graphics are great, but they took a backseat for me.
Yeah, and I think the graphics are kind of like the music. It's very clean, very deliberate, which kind of adds to this well-built, polished feel. Like it's not over the top, but for a Game Boy game, and there is a lot of detail. There's a lot of fast-paced movement. Like you said, there wasn't really much slowdown or anything like that. And you got some cool tunes going in with this awesome gameplay. So to me, the look went really well with the sound and the feel.
I tell you what, though, this, if it made its way to the States and I played it as a kid, this would have, paired up, matched up with anything that I was playing at the time. I would have loved this.
Oh, yeah. I definitely want to spend more time with this for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's get into our next track. This is from Stage 6, which is the last level.
All right, you just heard Stage 6, composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
Very dark.
Yeah.
Sinister track. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it other than, it's all right.
I think this track was another thing that was another reminder of Metroid. Not necessarily the sound, but the fear that this track induced. Like, I can imagine... like you said, we didn't get to this point in the game on our own, but I could imagine getting there for the first time and being instantly afraid because it feels like this is a boss track. Like it feels like you're about to die, and this is what you're going to listen to for this entire level.
Yeah, this actually sounds like a boss track to me.
Yeah,
this sounds like it's very menacing, very evil.
Yeah,
and so running through this last level, if you made it this far, I mean, bravo, because it's tough. And if you got this far, you're probably nervous because you're on your last life, or you're right at the brink of extinction yourself. So it just adds that intensity.
Yeah. So, but like you said, it does feel like a boss track, but this is actually not the boss track. There is boss tracks in this game, and next up is the boss track.
All right, that was the boss music composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
This is definitely not a track you want to listen to out of context.
Yeah.
This might be the track that is playing through your mind when you're like mortally wounded trying to drive yourself to the hospital or something. But I mean, this is dangerous. It's stress-inducing, heart racing. Like, it feels like time is running out, life is running out, and the boss is just in their last, most dangerous mode.
You know, and it's short too. It's only like 30 seconds or something, and for a good reason, because you're probably dead before you hear it loop,
right.
or
you've won,
or you've won. So,
and then you get that really awesome, mellow, kind of subtly sad, groovy track.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of other boss music. It's kind of what we'd expect. I probably didn't even have to hear it, and I could have guessed what it would sound like.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully, what it would have sounded like. What good boss music sounds like.
But it's a good track. It's there's nothing wrong with it. It's stress-inducing, kind of panic attack inducing.
Right.
And that's serves the purpose correctly, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So the game we've been talking about today, it's a really great game, but it was actually kind of done multiple times over. So another game based on the anime series with the exact same title was released for the Super Famicom in 1993. We'd mentioned that earlier.
Right.
But this one is a scrolling shooter. It's very, very different from this game. So it's interesting what they kind of chose to I guess showcase this series.
Right. No, we first came across the Game Boy version, and then we saw that there was a Super Famicom edition. So
I assumed it was going to be the same game.
Right. I just thought it was going to be another action platformer. But when I looked at it, I was really surprised that it was a side-scrolling kind of mech shooter. It scrolls horizontally. It's kind of bland a little bit, but
it doesn't jump out.
Right, and it has a lot of the kind of same elements of Blazon, like we just talked about. There's enemies. There's a lot of like kind of maze-like obstacles to avoid, like asteroids and things like that.
So basically, what we're saying is this is just like a standard cookie cutter shooter.
Yeah. I mean, it looks nice. It doesn't look bad. Some of the boss fights are pretty cool. It's got a really cool ending, background and stuff like that. But it was kind of interesting because the company that published this game, Interbeck, their first game was called Uchuu Senkan Yamato for the Game Boy, which is actually a Game Boy adaptation of the anime Space Battleship Yamato. So it's another anime, but I don't know if you guys remember, but in our Lunar episode, Noriyuki Iwadare mentioned that Space Battleship Yamato actually played a huge role in his life.
Right.
Which I thought was just kind of neat that this little thread of a company that made a game that wasn't that great, that we're talking about the better version of the Game Boy, had this thread that was tied to kind of Noriyuki Iwadare.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, that's obviously a far reach for bringing in a connection, but it always kind of happens, right?
Yeah.
It always kind of, there's some weird thing we're doing research for the episodes. We're like, oh, wow, okay. So this company did this and they, we just heard about this from someone else. I don't know. I like those little connections.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to look into this Game Boy adaptation of Space Battleship Yamato, but I mean, if it's anything like the Super Famicom version of Tekkaman Blade, I mean, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't anything special.
It's passable. Another game actually came out for the PC 98 based on the series called Tekkaman Blade Orbital Ring, but this time it's a tactical strategy-based game. It's very different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every game that they did for the series is completely different. And I watched like a playthrough of it, and I wasn't really impressed, but I didn't really get that into it, so maybe it's a way better game than I give it credit for.
Well, I mean, maybe with each game they were trying to find a different market, or one game came out and didn't quite do what they wanted. I don't know. I mean, they came out pretty quickly. I don't know when the
PC 98?
Yeah, I don't know when the PC 98 game came out, but I know that the Super Famicom and the Game Boy edition were very, very close together.
I believe it was like 1993, so it's probably right there. Tekkaman Blade, though, is also a playable character in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to see the character live on in something else.
That's funny because I really like the Tatsunoko games, and, I didn't even know that that's what it was from.
That's neat. I mean, that's another little neat thread that kind of we knew what the character was, but we didn't know where it came from or what it was from. So
yeah,
it's kind of neat.
You know, we really like this game.
Yeah, I definitely want to spend a lot more time with this Game Boy game.
But you know, I didn't hear this about this title from anybody else. Like, have you read any like reviews or anything on it?
No, I mean, this was one that I think kind of flew under the radar. It would be interesting to have been in Japan around this time, that in the early 90s, to see if there was much of a buzz. I mean, so many games were getting pumped out in the early 90s that this could have just been a few people played it, and or maybe they bought it because they had watched the anime and then were kind of like, okay, cool.
Right. Are you thinking about maybe speedrunning this sometime?
I don't know. It's a possibility. It looked fun and fast paced. There is a speedrun of this game, and the total time is 8 minutes and 34 seconds. So, and it's not that old. It's less than a month old.
That's crazy. What a weird coincidence.
Yeah. I mean, it's run by a speedrunner by the name of Jorf, which I've heard of him before in a lot of different games, running a lot of different things. So he's a pretty talented speedrunner. But yeah, if you want to go to speedrun.com, you can check out the full run of this, which is, I mean, it's very fast paced. There's actually a task video that we saw too that was only slightly faster. So
yeah,
that's
it's
pretty
insane how fast they're flying through us.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it because I watched that. That's how we got the track names, because I wanted to figure out like where they actually played. Otherwise, we'd just be saying BGM 11 or something. The whole time.
Right.
But so yeah, I used that to kind of find the track names. But I think if you did a run of this, you'd have some practice to kind of get caught up. Because I mean, I was just trying to play normally, and it was taking me forever, but I liked it.
Well, sometimes it's kind of interesting. You'd think that speedrunning is harder, but sometimes speedrunning makes beating games easier.
Oh, well, yeah, because you basically memorize your way through the game, And so.
Yeah. Well, and some of the tricks, it's very optimized, and you find like really simple ways to beat bosses and enemies, which is kind of neat.
Right. So when you beat the game, that last boss, you get an ending cinematic. So let's listen to that track, and we'll be right back.
You just heard the music from the ending cutscene composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
What a change of pace.
Yeah, I really like this one.
Me too.
It's very dark. I love that like trailing drum.
Yeah. I was gonna say the same thing. I really like that.
Yeah,
it made it a little more cinematic.
Oh yeah. I mean, and this game has a cinematic feel. It has a really big cutscene at the beginning of the game, so you kind of expect something in return at the end. This is a great track. This is definitely a track that would make you feel like it was worth getting to the end.
Yeah, a little bit somber.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Yeah, kind of a darker tone.
Yeah.
Kind of sad in a way, but I mean, the Earth's kind of destroyed, but you got all this rebuilding to do, I guess.
You got to move on. So the last track actually is the staff roll, which you hear directly after the ending scene there.
Mm-hmm.
This is really cool. Let's take a listen.
You just heard the staff roll composed by Norihiko Togashi for Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy.
Something about staff roll music that they just want to, amp you right back up.
Mm-hmm.
It's always right after a slow and kind of melancholy track. It's just pump you right back up.
A lot of games are kind of sad, so you get that sad, ending cutscene, and then they want to pump you back up with the people that made the game, and hopefully maybe that energy carries over into just restarting the game and playing through it again.
That's true. Maybe the music for the staff roll kind of represents their work ethic, and they're just they were busting balls, trying to make this game, get it out in time or something right after the anime, and all right, here was our blood, sweat, and tears for this game. Enjoy this final track. I liked it. I thought it was really cool. A lot of energy, a lot of fun, very Japanese staff roll sounding.
Yeah, I mean, when we like the game, so I think that's a good way for us to think about it, is that these people worked hard. This track was for them, and to kind of show that they're heroes making this awesome game for you guys to enjoy.
Totally. So today we covered Uchuu no Kishi Tekkaman Blade on the Game Boy, composed by Norihiko Togashi.
And if you want to know more about our show, you can find us in many places online, like our website, pixelatedaudio.com. We can also be found on a lot of different social media, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and even Twitch, all at Pixelated Audio.
Yep. If you guys like the show, we invite you to leave a comment or review on iTunes. That's always means a lot to us, very important. When we get those, we always get an extra ounce of joy throughout the day. Also, we haven't really mentioned this on the show, but we have a Discord server.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to the website, we actually have a link on there. If you guys use Discord, sometimes the channel's the server's very, very active. Sometimes it's, nobody will say anything for a day or so, but it's always game music related or retro gaming related, and it's a lot of fun. We have some really good conversations in there. So please, join in and shoot some messages to me and James. We always try to respond when we can.
Yeah.
We also have a suggestions channel. So if there's shows you guys like or ideas you guys like that you would like us to kind of look into and cover, by all means, that's kind of like our melting pot where we go to for ideas, and we're going to start really kind of utilizing those when we have a roadblock or a brain fart or something,
Oh yeah. And it's a great place to kind of meet up and chat, and it's kind of something that we're kind of moving towards being our main mode of getting in touch with different people, and you can keep up with what we're doing, the different things, like you get notifications when either of us are on our Twitch channels and doing different things like that, or this is what I ate for dinner, it was really cool, or something like that. I mean, it's a very laid back and chill place to just kind of chat about nerdy things.
A lot of I do want to say shout out to all the Hardcore Gaming 101 guys in there. Some really nice guys, and we've had some really great discussions. Also, don't forget that we are also the official podcast of VGMRips.net, where you can find high quality, sample accurate video game music. There's a ton of stuff to enjoy and listen to. So definitely check out the site and download some packs, rate them, and have fun.
Yeah.
VGM all day long.
Yeah, find some new stuff, send us a message, and we'll do an episode on it.
Yeah. And last but not least, we have a Patreon. So you can go to pixelatedaudio.com/Patreon, or the other way around, patreon.com/pixelatedaudio. And, if you love the show, or if you just kind of like it, throw a little bit of cash our way. It helps, us continue work, helps us, afford equipment expenses and all that jazz. And we appreciate it and want to say thank you to all of our current patrons.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned, but I think this episode might be our 3-year anniversary. So
what? Really?
Yeah, I think July is.
Man.
July it will be 3 years, and so that means we're out on most of our warranties. So any equipment that goes bad, we have to replace. So,
that's right.
So Patreon is very useful now and could be a great help to us. So.
Yeah. Anyway, some of our past episodes, we have a ton.
Oh, yeah. And, earlier we mentioned that we haven't done any Game Boy games in quite a while, but we do have some Game Boy specific episodes like Kirby's Dream Land 1 and 2, which was episode 14. We did a Pinball Volume 1, which was not all Game Boy, but there were a few Game Boy specific games in there.
It was Revenge of the Gator?
Yeah, and Kirby's Pinball, and there might have been a little bit more. But
maybe it was Pokemon Pinball? No.
I think Pokemon Pinball
was on an expansion pack, maybe.
Yeah. And then there's also Power Quest, which is an amazing soundtrack from the Game Boy.
That's probably my favorite Game Boy soundtrack of all time.
It's a really, really great one.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you back in a few weeks for the next show.